Tak Sung's jaw clenched as he replayed the security footage for the fourth time. The timestamp read 2:34 a.m. His private surveillance room felt suffocating, the blue glow from multiple monitors casting sharp shadows across his scarred face. There she was again, Shannon Culver, the American chef he'd hired 2 months ago, moving through the industrial kitchen like a ghost. In the grainy night vision feed, her movements looked guilty, furtive. She glanced over her shoulder twice before wrapping something in a kitchen towel and tucking it under her chef's coat. Her hands shook. Sung had built the Gim Gang syndicate on instinct, on reading weakness in men's eyes before they even knew they'd break. He'd suspected Shannon from the moment Ms. Bongcha came to him 3 weeks ago with the inventory reports. Premium Hanwoo beef, gone. Imported matsutake mushrooms, vanished. Bone broth made from ingredients worth more than most people's monthly salary, missing from the walk-in every other night. "She's desperate," Ms. Bongcha had said, her voice dripping with concern. "Americans always are. Probably selling to restaurants in Itaewon to pay off debts." It made sense. Shannon was an outsider, isolated, barely speaking Korean, working 16-hour shifts in a kitchen where the other staff treated her like contaminated air. She needed money. Everyone needed money. But watching on now, caught in the act on his million-won surveillance system, still made something twist in Sung's chest. He'd wanted to be wrong. Shannon disappeared down the hallway toward the west wing, the forbidden corridor where his mother's bedroom suite consumed the entire 3rd floor, the same west wing Ms. Bongcha had specifically warned Shannon never to enter on her first day. Sung leaned forward, his Rolex catching the monitor's cold light. His phone sat on the desk beside the keyboard, its weight a familiar promise. This was it. The proof he needed. One phone call and Shannon Culver would be handled. Not killed, he wasn't a savage, but removed, permanently, sent back to whatever American city she'd carled from with enough fear in her bones to never speak of what she'd seen. His finger moved toward his phone. But something made him wait. The camera inside his mother's bedroom activated, motion-triggered. The feed was clearer here. He'd installed military-grade equipment 6 months ago when his mother's health started declining. The room appeared on screen. Silk curtains, mahogany furniture, a hospital bed that cost more than a luxury sedan. And his mother. She sat on the edge of that bed, skeletal thin in designer silk pajamas that now hung off her frame like a burial shroud. Even through the camera, Sung could see her ribs pressing against the fabric. Her gray hair, usually immaculately styled by Ms. Bongcha's staff, fell limp around her hollow face. Then Shannon entered the frame. What happened next made Sung's breath stop completely in his throat. Shannon knelt beside his mother, unwrapping the stolen bundle with trembling hands. Inside was a thermos, steam rising as she opened it. The older woman's eyes, those same dark eyes that had comforted Sung through childhood nightmares, that had looked at him with such pride when he'd built his empire, suddenly came alive, focused, desperate. His mother reached for the thermos with shaking hands, but Shannon gently guided them back. She pulled out a spoon, filled it with what looked like a rich golden broth, and brought it carefully to her cracked lips. The older woman, whom Ms. Bongcha swore had lost all will to eat, opened her mouth like a starving bird. Sung watched, paralyzed, as Shannon fed his mother with a gentleness he'd never seen in his violent world. Between each spoonful, the American chef wiped his mother's chin, whispered something that made the old woman's eyes glisten with tears, and then continued feeding her with the patience of someone who'd done this before, who cared to do this. His mother ate, and ate, and ate. The thermos emptied. Shannon produced another small container, rice porridge it looked like, and his mother consumed that too, her skeletal hands now gripping Shannon's wrist as though afraid the food would be taken away. That's when he saw it. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, his mother's dinner tray from earlier that evening, sitting untouched on the dresser. The official meal Ms. Bongcha's staff claimed she'd refused. Except the tray wasn't filled with food. It was empty. Completely, impossibly empty. Sung's hand moved across the keyboard with sudden violence, pulling up the hallway camera from 6 hours earlier. He watched Ms. Bongcha herself enter his mother's room with a tray, watched her set it down on the dresser, watched her lean close to his mother and say something. He had no audio, but he could read the head housekeeper's lips clearly enough. Still being difficult? You'll eat when you've learned respect. The ice in Sung's veins turned to fire. He cycled back through a week of footage, then 2 weeks, then a month, the same pattern every single day. Miss Bongcha bringing empty trays, his mother begging, actually begging for food that never came, the staff entering to check on her but bringing nothing, his own mother wasting away in a house full of servants paid to care for her. And Shannon, beautiful, desperate Shannon, who everyone assumed was stealing to survive, was actually stealing to keep his mother alive. The security room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Sung's vision blurred. His hands that had broken men, hands that had built an empire, shook as he gripped the edge of the desk. He'd trusted them, Miss Bongcha, who'd raised him after his father died, the staff who'd served his family for decades. He'd trusted them completely, had delegated his mother's care to them because he was too important, too busy running the syndicate to handle domestic matters. And they'd been killing her, slowly, methodically, right under his nose. On screen, Shannon was braiding his mother's hair now, the old woman's face soft with something Sung hadn't seen in months. Peace. Before we continue, go ahead and drop a like, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. It truly means a lot to me seeing our storytelling family grow across every corner of the globe. Every view, every share, every word of encouragement helps us keep bringing these powerful hidden stories to light, together. Now find your comfortable spot and let me take you into a world where nothing is what it seems. 3 weeks earlier. Shannon Culver's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she stood in the industrial kitchen of the Gumgong estate. The space was massive, easily 3 times the size of any professional kitchen she'd worked in back in Dallas. Stainless steel gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, 2 Viking ranges, a walk-in freezer that could fit a small car, prep stations that looked like surgical theaters. And silence. Cold, hostile silence. 6 Korean kitchen staff members stared at her like she'd just tracked mud across a temple floor. They whispered to each other in rapid Korean she couldn't follow, their eyes sliding over her chef's coat, the only thing she owned that still looked professional, with obvious disdain. Ms. Culver. The voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Shannon turned to find a woman in her mid-60s standing in the doorway. She wore a perfectly tailored black hanbok, traditional yet somehow modern, and her silver hair was pulled into an immaculate bun. Everything about her screamed authority, from her rod-broad posture to the way the other staff immediately bowed their heads. I'm Miss Bongcha, the head housekeeper of this estate. I oversee all domestic operations, including the kitchen. Her English was flawless, her accent British educated. You'll report to me directly. Yes, ma'am. Shannon forced her voice to stay steady. She needed this job, needed it desperately. The debt collectors back home didn't care that she'd lost everything when her restaurant failed. They just wanted their money. Miss Bongcha's eyes traveled over Shannon with the same dismissive assessment the kitchen staff had given her. Let me be clear about your position here. You were hired because Mr. Tuck requires someone with Western culinary training for certain business dinners. That is the extent of your purpose. You will prepare what you're told to prepare when you're told to prepare it. You will not explore this house. You will not ask questions about the family or the business. You will certainly not speak unless spoken to. Shannon nodded, her throat tight. There is one area of this estate that is absolutely forbidden to all staff, the West Wing, 3rd floor. Mr. Tak's mother resides there due to her delicate health condition. She requires complete peace and privacy. The medical staff handles all her needs. Under no circumstances are you to go near that wing. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good. Miss Bongcha's expression didn't soften. Your shift begins at 5 a.m. and ends when the evening meal is cleared. Chef Kang will assign your duties. She gestured to a stone-faced man in his 50s wearing chef's whites. Don't make me regret convincing Mr. Tak to hire an American. With that, Miss Bongcha turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. The moment she disappeared, the whispers started again. Shannon caught a few words she recognized: foreigner, cheap, trouble. Chef Kang barked something in Korean that made the staff scattered to their stations. He looked at Shannon with barely concealed contempt. Prep station, back corner. Start with the vegetables for tonight's dinner. His English was choppy, grudging. He pointed to a mountain of scallions, radishes, and Korean chili peppers. Shannon grabbed her knife kit and moved to the designated station, acutely aware that she was being set up to fail. The back corner was furthest from the main prep area, isolated. She'd be working alone while the rest of the team functioned as a well-oiled machine, communicating in a language she didn't speak. She tied her hair tighter, pulled on her apron, and got to work. The first week was hell. The other cooks excluded her from every operation that mattered, relegating her to mindless prep work that any culinary student could handle. They forgot to tell her about menu changes. They switched the labels on containers so she'd grab the wrong ingredients. Once, someone replaced the salt in her station with sugar, and she'd nearly ruined an entire batch of banchan before catching the sabotage. Through it all, Shannon kept her head down and her mouth shut. She needed this job, needed the money, needed to prove she could survive in a world that clearly didn't want her there. But something was wrong in this house. She felt it in her bones. It started small, the waste. Shannon had worked in enough kitchens to know that food waste was inevitable, but what she saw at the Gyeomgang estate was different, excessive, deliberate. One evening, nearly 2 weeks into her employment, she was cleaning her station when she noticed Miss Bongcha emerge from the service elevator that led to the upper floors. The head housekeeper carried a covered tray, the kind used for individual meals. Shannon wouldn't have paid attention except for what happened next. Miss Bongcha walked straight to the trash compactor and without hesitation dumped the entire contents of the tray into it. Shannon froze, her cleaning rag suspended in mid-air. The tray had been full. She'd seen it clearly in that brief moment before it disappeared into the trash. Steamed fish, vegetable porridge, a traditional Korean side dish arrangement that looked carefully prepared. Fresh food, good food, the kind of meal someone would serve to someone important. Something interesting, Miss Culver? Miss Bongcha's voice made Shannon jump. No, ma'am, just finishing up. Miss Bongcha's eyes were cold. Mr. Tak's mother has become very difficult in her old age. Dementia, you understand. She refuses to eat most days. It's heartbreaking, but there's nothing to be done when the elderly lose their will to live. She said it with the practiced sadness of someone who'd repeated the explanation many times. Such a waste of Chef Kang's efforts, but we must keep trying. Shannon nodded, not trusting her voice. Get back to work. But Shannon couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, she watched, paid attention, and she saw the pattern. Every evening a tray went up on the service elevator, and every evening Miss Bongcha brought it back down untouched and threw it away. The food was always restaurant quality, carefully plated. The portions were small, appropriate for someone elderly with a diminished appetite. But something felt wrong. Shannon had worked in a nursing home kitchen during culinary school. She knew what it looked like when dementia patients refused food. The meals came back partially eaten, pushed around the plate, sometimes contaminated with non-food items. This wasn't that. These trays came back pristine, as if they'd never been offered at all. She wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers, but Miss Bong Cha's warning echoed in her head. Don't ask questions. Don't explore the house. Shannon kept her mouth shut and her eyes open. The night she found the West Wing, she'd gotten lost. It was past midnight. Her shift had ended hours ago, but Shannon had stayed late to perfect a sauce for the next day's business dinner, trying to prove her worth, to show she belonged in this kitchen despite the daily humiliations. When she finally finished, exhausted and covered in vegetable oil, she'd taken a wrong turn leaving the kitchen. The staff wing was in the east section of the mansion, but in her fatigue, Shannon had gone west instead, climbing a service staircase she'd never used before. The hallway she emerged into was different from the rest of the house, where the main estate was all modern luxury, marble and glass and contemporary art. This wing felt older, traditional. The walls were dark wood paneling, the floors covered in expensive Korean carpets that muffled her footsteps. Paper lanterns cast warm, low light. Shannon knew immediately she shouldn't be there. She turned to go back, but that's when she heard it. A sound, soft, desperate, almost like crying, but weaker, more broken. She should have walked away, should have run back to her room and forgotten she'd ever been there. But Shannon had spent 2 years taking care of her grandmother before the cancer took her. She knew the sound of suffering when she heard it. The sound came from behind an ornate wooden door at the end of the hallway. Light seeped from underneath it. Shannon's heart hammered as she approached. Her rational mind screamed at her to leave, but her feet kept moving forward. She pressed her ear to the door. Silence now, just the faint hum of medical equipment. She absolutely should not. Shannon turned the handle. The door wasn't locked. The room beyond was huge, a master suite converted into something between a bedroom and a hospital room. A massive bed dominated one wall, surrounded by IV stands and monitoring equipment that beeped softly. Traditional Korean furniture mixed with modern medical necessities. The windows were floor to ceiling, looking out over the estate's gardens. And in front of one of those windows, illuminated by moonlight, stood a woman. Shannon's breath caught in her throat. The woman was skeletal. There was no other word for it. She wore expensive silk pajamas that hung off her frame like she was a wire hanger draped in fabric. Her gray hair fell limp and unkempt past her shoulders. But it was her posture that made Shannon's stomach turn. She was bent forward, her face pressed against the window glass, her tongue extended, licking the condensation off the pane, drinking the moisture off the window like she was dying of thirst. "Oh my gosh," Shannon whispered. The woman spun around, terror flooding her gaunt face. Even emaciated, Shannon could see she'd once been beautiful. Her bone structure was elegant, her eyes large and dark, but those eyes were wild now, animal-like in their fear. "Please," the woman rasped in English, her accent thick. "Please, food, water, please." Shannon's culinary training kicked in before her fear could paralyze her. She recognized starvation when she saw it. The sunken cheeks, the protruding bones, the dry, cracked lips, the desperate way the woman's hands trembled as she reached toward Shannon. This wasn't dementia. This wasn't someone who'd lost the will to eat. This was someone who was being denied food. "I'll get you something," Shannon said, her voice shaking. "I'll come back, I promise." The woman grabbed Shannon's wrist with surprising strength. "They watch. Cameras. They see." "Who watches?" "All of them. The woman, Bong Cha. The woman's eyes darted to the door, paranoid. "She says I'm being ungrateful, says I refuse to eat, but she brings nothing. Only empty plates, only—" Footsteps in the hallway. The woman released Shannon's wrist and stumbled back to her bed, moving with the practiced speed of someone who'd learned to hide. "Go, go, they'll kill you if they find you here." Shannon didn't need to be told twice. She slipped out of the room and pressed herself against the wall, her heart threatening to explode from her chest. The footsteps passed, a security guard on patrol, his radio crackling softly. When silence returned, Shannon ran. She fled back through the hallways, found her way to the staff wing, and locked herself in her tiny room. She sat on her bed, shaking, trying to process what she'd seen. Tak Sung's mother, the woman the entire household spoke of with such reverent sadness, the woman who was supposedly dying of dementia-induced anorexia. She was being starved to death, and everyone in this house was either complicit or blind. Shannon didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She should leave, should pack her bags and get on the first flight back to Dallas. This wasn't her problem. This wasn't her fight. But that woman's face, those desperate eyes, the way she'd licked condensation off a window because she was so thirsty. Shannon had lost her grandmother to cancer, had watched her waste away despite every medical intervention, every prayer, every desperate attempt to keep her alive. That had been inevitable, cruel, but natural. This was different. This was murder. Slow, calculated murder. By morning, Shannon had made her decision. She went to the kitchen early, before the rest of the staff arrived. The walk-in freezer was stocked with ingredients most people would never see in their lifetimes: premium Hanwoo beef, imported matsutake mushrooms, abalone, dried sea cucumber, food meant for Tak Sung's business dinners and the endless parade of lieutenants and associates who passed through the estate. Shannon grabbed beef bones from the scrap pile, bones Chef Kang would have thrown away or used for stock. She took vegetables that were slightly past their prime, the ones destined for the compost, ingredients that wouldn't be missed, that existed in the liminal space between valuable and garbage. She worked quickly, her hands steady despite her fear. She made a bone broth the way her grandmother had taught her, rich, nutritious, packed with collagen and minerals, the kind of thing that could sustain someone who was starving. She strained it carefully, poured it into a thermos she'd bought with her own money, and hid it in her locker. The day passed in agonizing slowness. Shannon went through her prep work mechanically, her mind on what she'd have to do that night. Chef Kang yelled at her twice for being distracted. One of the other cooks accidentally knocked over her mise en place, scattering her carefully cut vegetables across the floor. Shannon cleaned it up without complaint and started over. Finally, midnight came. The kitchen emptied. The night security guard made his rounds on a predictable schedule. Shannon had been watching for days. She had a 30-minute window. She retrieved the thermos, wrapped it in a kitchen towel, and tucked it under her chef's coat. Then she made her way to the West Wing, her heart threatening to crack through her ribs. The door to the mother's room was unlocked again. Shannon slipped inside. The older woman was in bed this time, lying so still that Shannon's first terrified thought was that she'd arrived too late. But then those dark eyes opened, and recognition flooded them. "You came back." "I promised. I brought you soup, real soup." She'd expected the woman to be weak, to need help sitting up. Instead, the older woman moved with desperate speed, her skeletal hands reaching for the thermos like it was salvation itself. Wait, let me help you." Shannon poured the broth into the thermos cup, her hands steadier now that she was doing something, helping someone. "It's hot, be careful." The woman took the cup with both hands and brought it to her lips. She drank and drank, and when the cup was empty, she looked at Shannon with tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "More?" Shannon poured again, and again. She'd brought a quart of broth, and the woman consumed it all, barely pausing between cups. When the thermos was finally empty, she sat back against her pillows, breathing hard. "How long?" Shannon asked quietly. How long since you've eaten? Real food? The woman's voice was stronger now, less raspy. Weeks, maybe more. I lose track of days. They bring trays, beautiful trays, but empty, always empty. And they tell me I'm confused, that I ate and forgot, that my mind is going. Her hands trembled as she touched her own face. Maybe it is. Maybe I am crazy. You're not crazy. Shannon's voice was fierce. They're gaslighting you, making you think you're losing your mind while they kill me. The woman said it calmly, like she'd made peace with it. I know. I've known for some time, but I'm weak, can't leave the bed most days. The phone doesn't work. And my son doesn't know, doesn't come. He's busy with his empire, his business. He trusts Bong Cha. He's trusted her since he was a boy. Shannon's chest ached. Why? Why would they do this? Money. Always money. The woman's laugh was bitter. My husband left me everything. The estate, accounts, investments. In my will, it goes to Sung when I die. But there are complications, clauses, people who would benefit if the transfer is messy, if I die without proper witnesses, It's complicated. Rich people's problems. But the staff knows. Bong Cha knows. And they've been patient. I need to tell someone. The police or... No. The woman grabbed Shannon's wrist again. You don't understand. Sung runs the Gyumgong Syndicate. He's not a legitimate businessman. She searched for the word. Dangerous, powerful, connected to people who don't call the police because they own the police. If you go to authorities, they'll tell Sung you're trying to extort him, that you're lying about we to get money, and he'll believe them. He'll believe Bong Cha. Then what do I do? Nothing. The woman's eyes were sad but firm. You forget you saw me. You keep your job. You go home to America with your pay and your life. This is not your battle. Shannon looked at this woman, this stranger who'd been left to die by everyone who should have protected her, and felt something harden in her chest. I'm coming back tomorrow night, she said, with more food, real food, and the night after that, and the night after that, until we figure out how to get you out of here. They'll catch you. They watch everything. Then I'll be careful. Shannon stood, tucking the empty thermos back under her coat. What's your name? The woman smiled, and for a moment, Shannon could see the beauty she must have been. Young Hee. My name is Young Hee. I'm Shannon, and I'm going to keep you alive, Young Hee. I promise. The older woman's eyes filled with tears again. Why? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Shannon thought of her grandmother, of sitting by her bedside, feeding her soup when the chemo made everything taste like metal, of the way her grandmother had held her hand and thanked her for not giving up even when there was no hope left. Because someone should, Shannon said simply, because you deserve better than this. She left before she could see Young Hee cry. Over the next week, Shannon became a thief in earnest. She stole bones and vegetables destined for trash. She took small amounts of rice, of seaweed, of sesame oil, ingredients so common in the massive kitchen that their absence wouldn't register. She made broths and porridges and simple, nutritious meals in the dead of night, then smuggled them upstairs in her thermos. And every night, Young Hee ate. The change was remarkable. Within days, the older woman's eyes grew clearer. Her skin, which had looked paper-thin and gray, took on a healthier tone. She could sit up without help. She could speak without her voice cracking from dehydration. You're getting stronger, Shannon said one night, as she watched Young Hee finish a bowl of rice porridge enriched with bone marrow and soft-cooked vegetables. I'm gaining weight. Young Hee touched her own cheek, feeling the slight fullness returning. They'll notice soon. Maybe when your son sees you looking better. He hasn't visited in months. There's no accusation in Young Hee's voice, just sad acceptance. The dementia diagnosis. She paused. Which I don't have, by the way. Bong Cha had a doctor come. A doctor she paid. He examined me for 10 minutes and declared me mentally unfit. Sung believed him. Why wouldn't he? The doctor had credentials. Bong Cha had been caring for me for years, and I was confused, weak from hunger. I couldn't defend myself coherently. Shannon's hands clenched around the empty bowl. This is insane. How can they get away with this? Because people see what they expect to see. Young Hee's voice was gentle, like she was explaining something to a child. Sung expects his elderly mother to decline. He expects the dementia his generation fears. He expects the staff to care for me because they always have. He's a smart man, my son, brilliant even, but he's blind to this because accepting it would break him. They sat in silence for a moment, Shannon processing the twisted logic of it all. They will kill you if they find out, Young Hee said finally. Not immediately, not obviously, but you'll disappear. An accident, a sudden deportation. This family has resources. I know. Then why do you keep coming? Shannon met Young Hee's eyes. Would you stop if you were me? Young Hee smiled. No, I wouldn't. She reached out and took Shannon's rough, work-worn hand in her own thin fingers. You have a good heart. Your parents raised you well. Just my grandmother. My parents weren't around much. Shannon squeezed back gently. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Me too. Shannon stood, collecting the empty containers. I have to go. Security sweep in 5 minutes. Shannon? Young Hee's voice stopped her at the door. Be careful, please. I'm an old woman. I've lived my life. But you have so much ahead of you. Don't throw it away for me. I'll be careful, Shannon promised. But they both knew she was lying, because careful wasn't enough when you were stealing from the Mafia, feeding the woman they wanted dead, and defying the most feared crime boss in Seoul. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed, and when they did, Shannon knew there would be hell to pay. Ms. Bong Cha noticed on a Tuesday. Shannon had been careful, obsessively careful about what she took. She rotated her thefts between different categories, bones one night, vegetables the next, rice and pantry staples the night after that. She never took anything that would be missed immediately, never deviated from the pattern of waste that already existed in the kitchen. But Ms. Bong Cha hadn't maintained her position as head housekeeper of a crime syndicate by being careless. Shannon was cleaning her station after the dinner service when she heard raised voices from Chef Kang's office. The door was partially open, and Ms. Bong Cha's voice carried clearly into the kitchen. I've been tracking the inventory personally for the past week, Ms. Bong Cha said, her tone clipped and professional. The discrepancies are undeniable. Premium beef bones, the Hanwoo cuts we use for the master's private stock. Gone. Matsutake mushrooms, sesame oil, even the rice wine. Small amounts, but consistent. Chef Kang's response was muffled, defensive. I don't care about your excuses, Ms. Bong Cha cut him off. Your kitchen, your responsibility. But I've been watching, and I know who's behind it. The American. She works late, she has access, and she's desperate for money. Everyone knows she's drowning in debt back in the States. Shannon's blood went cold. She forced herself to keep wiping down the counter, to keep her movements natural, even as panic clawed at her throat. I want proof before I bring this to Mr. Tak, Ms. Bong Cha continued. He doesn't tolerate theft, but he also doesn't tolerate baseless accusations. Watch her. Document everything, and when we have evidence, I'll handle the rest. The office door closed with a definitive click. Shannon's hands shook as she put away her cleaning supplies. She should stop, should abandon Young Hee tonight, claim she'd paid off her debts and no longer needed to steal. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Young Hee's face, saw the way the older woman's eyes lit up each night when Shannon arrived, saw the strength slowly returning to her frail body, the hope blooming where there had been only resignation to death. Shannon couldn't stop, not now, not when Young Hee was finally getting better. She just had to be more careful. That night, she brought only a simple bone broth made from scraps she'd personally seen Chef Kang designate for disposal. Nothing that could be traced, nothing that could be proven as theft. Young Hee was sitting up in bed when Shannon arrived, a book in her lap. The older woman looked almost healthy now. Her cheeks had filled out slightly. Her eyes were clear and focused. She smiled when Shannon entered. "You look worried," Young Hee said immediately. Shannon tried to force a smile as she poured the broth. "Just tired." "You're a terrible liar." Young Hee accepted the cup but didn't drink, studying Shannon's face. "What happened?" "They're watching the inventory. Ms. Bong Cha knows something's off." Young Hee's hand trembled, sloshing broth over the rim of the cup. "Then you have to stop, tonight. Don't come back." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Young Hee set the cup down and grabbed Shannon's wrist. "Listen to me. You've given me 3 weeks. 3 weeks of food, of kindness, of hope. That's more than I deserved from a stranger, but I won't let you die for me." "You're not going to die." Shannon's voice was fierce. "Not if I can help it." "Shannon!" "No." Shannon pulled her wrist free and picked up the cup, pressing it back into Young Hee's hands. "Drink. We'll figure this out. I'll be more careful. The door burst open. Both women froze. Shannon's heart stopped. This was it. They'd been caught. She was finished. But it was just the night nurse, a young woman Shannon had seen in the hallways but never spoken to. The nurse's eyes went wide when she saw Shannon, saw the cup in Young Hee's hands, saw the obvious evidence of unauthorized feeding. "I won't tell," the nurse whispered in heavily accented English. She glanced over her shoulder nervously. "I wanted to help, but Ms. Bong Cha watches everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Shannon and Young Hee sat in shocked silence. "See?" Young Hee's voice was gentle. "Even the ones who want to help are too afraid. This is bigger than you, Shannon, bigger than both of us." But Shannon was already thinking, already planning. If the nurse had stayed silent this long, she might stay silent longer. And if Miss Bong Cha was watching the inventory, Shannon just needed to be smarter about what she took. She could do this. She had to. What Shannon didn't know was that her time had already run out. Tek Sung sat across from Miss Bong Cha in his private office, listening to her lay out the evidence with cold, methodical precision. Inventory logs, timestamps, a pattern of theft that aligned perfectly with Shannon Culver's work schedule. "She's selling it," Miss Bong Cha said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "Probably to restaurants in Itaewon, the foreign district. American beef, premium ingredients. She could make thousands of won on the black market, enough to pay off whatever debts drove her to Korea in the first place." Sung's jaw clenched. He'd taken a risk hiring Shannon, had overruled Miss Bong Cha's concerns about bringing in a foreigner, someone with no connections, no loyalty, no understanding of how things worked in his world. He'd thought her desperation would make her grateful, compliant. Instead, she'd betrayed him. "You're certain?" His voice was deadly quiet. "I've documented everything, but I wanted to wait for concrete proof before bringing this to you." Miss Bong Cha leaned forward. "With your permission, I'd like to install additional surveillance in the kitchen. Catch her in the act. Then we can handle this appropriately." Sung nodded slowly. "Do it. But I want access to the feeds. I want to see this myself." "Of course." Miss Bong Cha stood, smoothing her hanbok. "I'll have it installed tonight. And Sung?" She paused at the door. "I'm sorry. I know you had hopes for her integration into the household staff." After she left, Sung sat alone in his office, staring at the inventory reports. He'd built his empire by trusting his instincts, by reading people. How had he missed this? How had he not seen Shannon Culver for what she was, just another desperate foreigner willing to steal from the hand that fed her? He thought of his mother wasting away in the West Wing, thought of how he'd failed her by being too busy, too distant, too willing to delegate her care to others. The guilt ate at him daily. At least he could handle this. At least he could eliminate one problem, even if he couldn't fix the others. The surveillance equipment arrived the next day. Military-grade cameras, motion-activated, with night vision and audio capabilities. The technicians installed them in the kitchen, in the hallways, and, at Sung's insistence, in his mother's room. "I want to see everything," he told the head technician. "Yes, sir. The feeds will route directly to your private security hub. You'll have complete access." That night, Sung sat in his security room, watching the monitors flicker to life. Multiple screens showed different angles of the kitchen, the service corridors, the West Wing hallway. And there, in crystal-clear high definition, his mother's bedroom. His breath caught when he saw her on screen. She looked worse than he remembered, so much worse. When had she gotten that thin? When had her hair become so unkempt? The last time he'd visited, when was that? 3 months ago? 4? She'd been frail, yes, but not this skeletal. Guilt twisted in his gut. He should visit more, should spend time with her instead of hiding from the reality of her decline. But seeing her like this, seeing the dementia rob her of the sharp, fierce woman who'd raised him alone after his father's death, it was too painful. Better to remember her as she'd been. Better to let Miss Bung Cha and the medical staff handle the day-to-day reality of her care. Sung forced himself to look away from his mother's screen and focus on the kitchen feeds. Shannon would slip up eventually, would take something valuable, something he could point to as irrefutable proof of her theft, and then he would make an example of her. He waited, watched. The kitchen operated as normal, Chef Kong barking orders, the staff moving in practiced coordination, Shannon relegated to her corner prep station. Hours passed. Sung's eyes grew heavy, but he forced himself to stay alert. Then, just after midnight, movement on the kitchen feed. Shannon appeared, dressed in her off-duty clothes, an oversized hoodie and leggings that made her look young and vulnerable. She moved quietly through the kitchen, pulling ingredients from various locations. Beef bones from the scrap bucket, vegetables that looked slightly wilted, rice from the bulk storage. Sung leaned forward, his pulse quickening. This was it. But Shannon wasn't packaging the food to sell. She was cooking. He watched, confused, as she made a broth, a simple, careful bone broth, the kind that took hours to develop properly. She worked with a tenderness that seemed at odds with theft, tasting and adjusting, adding vegetables with precision. When it was done, she poured it into a thermos, wrapped it in a kitchen towel, and tucked it under her hoodie. Then she left the kitchen and headed toward the service stairs, toward the West Wing. Sung's confusion turned to cold fury. She wasn't selling the food. She was taking it to someone. A boyfriend? A contact? Was she using his mother's wing as a meeting point for some kind of operation? He switched to the hallway camera, watched Shannon creep down the corridor with obvious fear in her posture. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her movements jerky with nerves. Then she opened the door to his mother's room and slipped inside. Sung's hand moved to his gun automatically. What the hell was she doing? He switched to the bedroom camera, and what he saw made the world tilt. His mother wasn't in bed. She was sitting in the chair by the window, waiting. And when Shannon entered, young He's entire face transformed with joy. "You came," his mother said, her voice clear and strong, stronger than Sung had heard it in months. "Of course I came." Shannon knelt beside the chair, pulling out the thermos with shaking hands. I brought beef bone broth tonight, rich with lots of vegetables. You need the nutrients." Sung watched paralyzed as Shannon poured the broth and his mother accepted it with trembling hands. His mother, who supposedly refused to eat, who had dementia-induced anorexia, drank the broth like she was dying of thirst. "Slowly," Shannon cautioned, her hand on Young Hee's arm. "I know you're hungry, but you'll make yourself sick." "I can't help it." Young Hee's eyes filled with tears. "It's so good. You're so good to me." "How are you feeling today? Any dizziness?" "Better. Stronger every day because of you." Young Hee set down the empty cup and took Shannon's hand. "But you have to stop. Miss Bong Cha is suspicious. I heard her talking to the day nurse. They're watching you." "I know, but I can't stop. Not when you're finally getting better." "Shannon." "We've had this argument." Shannon's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not abandoning you. We're going to figure this out." Sung's hands were shaking. He rewound the footage, played it again. His mother speaking clearly, eating eagerly, looking at Shannon with such gratitude, such affection. This wasn't dementia. This wasn't anorexia. He switched to the archived footage from earlier in the evening, fast-forwarded through hours of his mother alone in her room, pacing, clearly agitated. Then the door opened, and Miss Bong Cha entered carrying a dinner tray. Sung turned up the volume. "Still being difficult?" Miss Bong Cha's voice was cold. She set the tray on the dresser, and Sung could see now that it was empty, completely empty. "You'll eat when you've learned respect, when you've signed the papers I need signed." "Please," his mother begged, her voice cracking, "please, just some water, some rice, anything." "Sign the papers and I'll feed you myself." Miss Bong Cha leaned close. "Sign them or waste away. It's your choice." Then she left the kitchen, taking the empty tray with her. Sung's vision blurred. He couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. Miss Bong Cha, the woman who'd raised him, who'd comforted him when his father died, who'd run the household for 20 years with unwavering loyalty. She was starving his mother to death. He cycled through days of footage with shaking hands. The pattern was undeniable. Miss Bong Cha bringing empty trays, his mother begging for food, the staff, his staff, people he trusted, ignoring her pleas or actively taunting her. And Shannon, beautiful, brave Shannon, risking her life every night to feed a woman she had no reason to care about. Sung's hand found the footage from 2 hours ago, watched Miss Bong Cha enter his mother's room and slap a bowl of actual porridge out of Young Hee's hands. "You think the American will save you?" Miss Bong Cha hissed. "She's about to be exposed as a thief. Mr. Tuck will handle her himself, and then you'll have no one but me. So sign the papers, old woman, or die alone." The bowl shattered on the floor. His mother wept. And later, Shannon came. Shannon, who cleaned up the broken porridge and fed Young Hee from her own secret stash, who braided his mother's hair gently while humming a soft melody, who treated her with more dignity and care than anyone in this godforsaken house. Sung wept. He sat in his security room, this man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, and he wept like a child for his mother's suffering, for his own blindness, for the betrayal of people he'd trusted with everything, and for Shannon Culver, the stranger who'd shown more loyalty to his family than anyone who carried his name. When the tears finally stopped, Sung's grief crystallized into something else. Rage. Cold, calculating, absolute rage. He picked up his phone. "Assemble everyone," he told his head of security. "Kitchen staff, household staff, my lieutenants. Everyone. I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night. Mandatory attendance." "Sir?" "Just do it." Sung hung up and turned back to the monitors. On screen, Shannon was leaving his mother's room, the empty thermos hidden under her hoodie. His mother watched her go with such tenderness that it made Sung's chest ache. Tomorrow night he would set things right, or he would burn his entire household to the ground trying. The dining hall of the Gemgang estate had hosted many gatherings, but never one quite like this. Sung had ordered every member of the household staff to attend, along with his key lieutenants and advisors. The long table was set with the finest china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier overhead. Miss Bongcha had supervised the preparations personally, clearly pleased that Sung was finally engaging in the social rituals she'd been encouraging for months. It's good for morale. The staff needs to see you, to feel connected to the family. If only she knew. Shannon had been told to attend as well, though she'd tried to refuse. Chef Kong had been insistent, bordering on aggressive. Mr. Tak requests your presence. You don't refuse Mr. Tak. So she'd come, wearing the only dress she owned, a simple black thing that had seen better days. She sat at the far end of the table, isolated from the Korean staff who whispered and shot her venomous looks. She'd barely touched her food, her stomach in knots. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Sung sat at the head of the table, impeccable in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. He'd been watching her all evening with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Shannon knew. Somehow he knew. Shannon's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," Sung said suddenly, his voice cutting through the low conversation. The room fell silent. "I've realized recently that I've been distant, too focused on business matters, too willing to delegate the domestic side of our operations to others." Miss Bongcha smiled, clearly thinking this was an acknowledgement of her service. "I've been blind," Sung continued, his eyes moving around the table. "Willfully blind. But recently something happened that made me realize I don't own my own household at all." Shannon's heart hammered. This was it. He was going to expose her in front of everyone. She gripped the edge of the table, preparing to run. "Miss Bongcha," Sung said softly, "come here, please." The head housekeeper stood, smoothing her hanbok with a satisfied expression. She walked to Sung's side, clearly expecting praise, recognition for her years of service. Sung grabbed her arm, not gently, and pulled her toward the large screen that had been set up at the front of the room. Shannon had assumed it was for some kind of business presentation. "I want to show everyone something," Sung said, his voice deadly calm. "A documentary, if you will, about loyalty, about betrayal, about what happens when you think your boss is too stupid to notice what's happening in his own house." He pressed a button on the remote. The screen flickered to life. And there, in high-definition clarity, was footage of Miss Bongcha entering Young Hee's room with an empty tray. The room went deathly silent. Shannon watched in horror as the footage played, watched Miss Bongcha taunt a starving woman, watched her slap food out of Young Hee's hands, watched her threaten and manipulate and slowly murder someone she was supposed to care for. The staff at the table had gone pale. Several of the Korean cooks were openly crying. Sung's lieutenants sat frozen, their expressions carefully neutral as they calculated the implications. Then the footage changed. Shannon saw herself on screen, saw herself sneaking into Young Hee's room with her thermos, saw herself feeding the older woman with gentle hands, braiding her hair, treating her with the basic human dignity she'd been denied by everyone else. "This," Sung said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury, "is Shannon Culver, the woman Miss Bongcha accused of theft, the woman she wanted me to execute for stealing from my household." He paused the footage on an image of Shannon holding Young Hee's hand. "She was stealing," Sung continued, "stealing scraps, garbage, food destined for the trash, and she was using it to keep my mother alive while the people I trusted, the people I paid, the people I considered family were actively trying to kill her." Miss Bongcha tried to speak, but Sung's grip on her arm tightened. My mother is dying, Sung said, and now his voice broke. Not from dementia, not from old age, from starvation, from abuse, from a conspiracy orchestrated by the woman who raised me. He released Miss Bong Cha and turned to face the room. I want everyone involved in this to stand up, now. If you participated in withholding food from my mother, if you knew and said nothing, if you helped cover this up, stand up now and I might let you leave with your life. Silence. Then slowly 3 members of the kitchen staff stood. The day nurse, 2 of the household cleaners. Anyone else? No one moved. Sung pulled out his gun, a casual movement like he was retrieving his phone. He didn't point it at anyone, didn't need to. The threat was implicit. Last chance. 2 more people stood, one of his junior lieutenants who'd been promised a cut of young He's assets, one of the gardeners. Sung looked at each of them in turn, his expression cold. Then he spoke into his phone. Security, remove these individuals from the property. They have 1 hour to collect their belongings. After that, if I see any of them within a mile of this estate, they're dead. Am I clear? The security team appeared from the shadows. They'd been waiting, Shannon realized. This had all been planned. The traders were escorted out, Miss Bong Cha fighting and screaming until someone gagged her. The room felt enormous in their absence. Sung turned off the screen, turned to face the remaining staff and lieutenants. Let me be very clear about something, he said. My mother is the matriarch of this family. She is to be treated with absolute respect and care. Anyone who harms her, anyone who neglects her, anyone who so much as speaks to her disrespectfully will answer to me personally. Do you understand? A chorus of "Yes, sir," echoed through the room. Good, you're dismissed, except, his eyes found Shannon, and she froze. Miss Culver, stay. The room emptied in seconds, people fleeing the oppressive atmosphere like rats from a sinking ship. Soon it was just Shannon and Sung, alone in the vast dining hall. Shannon stood on shaking legs, preparing for, she didn't know what. Punishment for getting involved? Gratitude? Anger that she'd hidden the truth instead of coming to him directly? What she didn't expect was for Tok Sung, head of the Gum Gang Syndicate, to fall to his knees in front of her. What are you... Don't leave. His voice was raw, desperate. Please, I know I have no right to ask. I know what you've been through here, what you've risked, but please don't leave. Shannon stared at him, unable to process what was happening. My mother is alive because of you, Sung continued, and there were tears on his face now. You saved her when I was too blind to see she needed saving. You risked everything, your job, your life for a stranger, for someone you had no reason to help. I couldn't just... I know you couldn't. He looked up at her, and Shannon saw genuine anguish in her dark eyes. That's who you are. That's the kind of person you are, and I'm begging you not to leave. My mother needs you. His voice broke. I need you to help me fix this, to help her recover, to teach me how to be the son she deserves. Shannon's mind reeled. I'm just a cook. You can hire nurses, doctors. She doesn't need nurses. She needs someone who cares. Sung's hands clenched into fists. Someone who sees her as a person, not a burden. Someone who'll feed her with gentle hands and braid her hair and treat her with dignity. Someone like you. Mr. Tok, Sung, please, just Sung. Shannon looked at this powerful, dangerous man kneeling before her and saw not a crime boss, but a terrified son who'd almost lost his mother. I'll stay, she heard herself say. For young He, I'll stay and help her get better. Relief flooded Sung's face. Thank you. I'll pay you anything, give you anything you need, a better room, a salary increase, whatever. Shannon's voice was quiet. I just need you to visit her, to spend time with her. She talks about you constantly, about how proud she is of you, how much she misses you. The words hit Sung like physical blows. He nodded, unable to speak. Then he stood, and Shannon saw the transformation as he shifted from vulnerable son back to commanding boss. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I've had papers drawn up. I'm putting you in charge of my mother's care, complete authority over her medical decisions, her daily routine, everything. The staff will answer to you. Anyone who questions your judgment will be removed." Shannon took the envelope with numb fingers. "And one more thing," Sung's voice dropped, became almost hesitant. "I'm adding you to my mother's will, half of her estate. When she passes, many years from now, if you have anything to say about it, you'll be provided for. It's not enough, not nearly enough to repay what you've done, but it's all I can offer." "That's not necessary." "It's necessary to me." Sung's eyes met hers. "You saved my family, Shannon Culver. The least I can do is make sure you're part of it." Shannon didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the whiplash of the past hour, from terrified theft victim to honored family member. "Can I see her?" she finally asked. "Young Hee? I want to make sure she's okay after everything." "Of course, I'll take you." They walked through the quiet mansion together, an unlikely pair. When they reached Young Hee's room, Sung hesitated at the door. "I haven't been a good son," he said quietly. "I let my fear of losing her keep me away. I let strangers care for her while I hid from the reality of her aging. His voice cracked, "I almost let her die because I was too much of a coward to face her illness." Shannon put a hand on his arm. "You're here now. That's what matters." Sung opened the door. Young Hee was awake, sitting up in bed with a book. She looked up when they entered, and her eyes went wide when she saw her son. "Sung?" Her voice was uncertain, like she couldn't believe he was real. "Hi, Mom." Sung crossed the room and knelt beside her bed, taking her thin hand in both of his. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Young Hee's other hand came up to touch his face, trembling. "You know?" "I know everything, and I've handled it. You're safe now. I promise you're safe." Mother and son clung to each other, both crying. Shannon stepped back, giving them privacy. But Young Hee reached out, grabbing Shannon's hand and pulling her close. "Both of you," the older woman said, her voice fierce despite the tears. "Both of my children, together. That's all I wanted." Shannon started to correct her. She wasn't Young Hee's daughter, wasn't family, but Sung caught her eye and shook her head slightly. "Let her have this," his expression said. "Let us all have this." So Shannon stayed, held Young Hee's hand while Sung held the other, and for the first time since entering the Gum Gang estate, she felt something other than fear. She felt like she had come home.